designed the most consistently powerful next-generation console. And we built state-of-the-art platform technology to allow every developer to realize their full vision.
Where are the games at?
Where are the games?
Where are the games?
It's dry. Where are the games?
I kind of keep waiting for them to do their thing.
I don't see anything.
These are easily the most pointless upgrades I've ever experienced.
What is the point of buying a console if you can just make a PC?
If you're gonna have everything on PC, why not just buy a PC and abandon the console?
Where are the games? Where are the deadlines? Where are the projects? Where are the teases? Like, it feels weird that it's like,
Why buy consoles?
Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes advantage of that feature set.
Something's happening with video game consoles. They've changed from machines people couldn't wait to get their hands on to machines people couldn't wait to forget. And after weeks of digging, I boiled down every problem the 9th generation has down to 3. So let's break them down, starting with the most obvious of them all, the games. You see, every console generation is measured by one thing and one thing only: the games. The 360 had Halo 3, the PlayStation 3 had Uncharted, and the Wii had the Wii Sports Tennis game that broke all of our TVs. But unlike the previous generations, the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X technically have way more games than any other console in history. Every week a new indie game releases, there's backwards compatibility for almost any game that you can think of, and if God forbid those older games didn't play well then there's a pretty good chance it's been completely remade. So then why does this generation feel like it has nothing? How does that make any sense? Well, the answer starts getting more clear when we look at every hit this generation's had so far. There's a problem. Do you see it? Hold on, let me remove every game that was made primarily for the previous generation. Now let's remove every game that's considered a better playing experience on the PC. And last but not least, let's remove every remake or remaster of an existing game. The list is dramatically smaller, isn't it? I mean, if these games tell us anything, it's that there's something in the water at Insomniac and we gotta protect them at all costs.
they love me.
But this generation's games are actually a bigger problem than you'd think when we compare them to the previous generations, specifically the Xbox 360, PS3, and Wii generation. For context, the 7th generation of consoles objectively had worse development tools, worse hardware to build games on, less people with skills to build them, and less documentation to learn from. I mean, these consoles released before social media was even a thing, yet here's the games they released during the same amount of time as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. That's pretty wild, right? You see, back then, every game was made solely for that generation of consoles without remakes, and you could forget about a PC port back then. I mean, that just wasn't a thing. Because during that time, Steam is just getting started, Blizzard makes like one game every decade, and Microsoft is pushing the insanely buggy games for Windows Live. Look, these games technically aren't telling you the full story. While most of these games are critically acclaimed, it's what they did for the industry that made the 7th generation so special. For example, Gears of War revolutionized third-person cover shooters, cooperative story, and the brown color palette that every game used for a lot longer than they should have. Wii Sports revolutionized motion controls made accessible for a brand new casual audience. Technically, because of the Wii, anyone could play games now. Rest in peace to all the TVs out there. And back then, Call of Duty actually revolutionized FPS controls, multiplayer progression, and 60 frames per second as a staple of competitive multiplayer.
50,000 people used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
But what's more insane is that the publishers that absolutely dominated in the 7th generation have completely bombed in this generation.
Next generation gaming!
Warner Brothers was on top of the world with Batman and Shadow of Mordor, but then they released Suicide Squad, a game that nobody wanted.
How you feeling, Floyd? Ready to kick your ass?
Nobody. Ubisoft dominates with Assassin's Creed, but then launches their quadruple A game Skull and Bones to crickets. Like, that game came out 2 months ago and no one's talking about it. It's already probably half off. Activision revolutionized multiplayer gaming with Call of Duty, a grounded military game, but now this is Call of Duty.
You could be the king, but watch the queen conquer.
Why is Nicki Minaj in Call of Duty? The war game.
Money!
Also, Microsoft, you know, the single biggest video game publisher in the world right now? Well, they launched Redfall completely broken, Starfield completely empty, Lionhead Studios completely fired, laid off 4 more companies during the making of this video.
You what?
And released 3 buggy, incomplete Halo games in a row. And they all hurt. Every single one of them hurt me. Quite significantly. So here's the $1 million question, if not $1 billion. What the heck is happening with video games? Well, you see, the simple answer that gains a lot of social credit these days is making games is hard.
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 Now, using my personal experience in the software development field, I've been doing it for like 10 years, I can't argue that the process is difficult. But I can argue that these companies seem to have no idea what people actually want to play. And when we look at the games through that lens, we can start to see why we're getting so many remakes of games that were so successful before, so many live service Destiny or Fortnite clones, and why so many games are made for the previous generation with a higher install base first instead of the new consoles we spent $600 of our hard-earned Canadian money on. They weren't cheap, guys. Maybe we start building for them. Just throwing that out there. Now, it might be because I love video games or because I'm Canadian and thus genetically predisposed to helping people come back stronger. That's that Zenkai in me, baby. So video game companies, here's some feedback that I'll give you free of charge. Ditch these consoles. No one thought the Xbox One was going to make it 2 years, let alone 11. Just take it out back to the farm, make it look at the sunset, do what you need to do. We're all on the same page. No one's going to be there and going to be like,
no, please, no, not the Xbox One and PS4, no, I love them so much.
Bring them to the farm. You see, it's time to make games that people actually want. We're talking a non-live service Batman game, an Assassin's Creed Black Flag 2, an actually good Halo game.
He's fun, I like him.
Or just look at what's popular in the mod scene and you'll get a hit. It's actually surprising how little companies do this. I mean, it worked for Dota, it worked for Team Fortress 2, it worked for Battle Royale, it worked for Counter-Strike, and all the gaming companies are like, we should make a Fortnite or a Destiny clone. Suicide Squad. Why?
Money!
But unfortunately, the lack of next generation games is just the first problem, because these consoles make playing games kind of difficult.
Dude, how is my timing that bad? How?
So let's say you get a brand new console. Here's a simple question for you. What should it do? It sounds simple enough, right? It should play video games, of course. But there's actually something else that I'm sure you'll remember after this. Now, if you didn't play the GameCube, then that just didn't work. But if you did, it's just one example of the magical experience a console can actually give players. And in every one of your favorite consoles, you'll find a similar experience when you play it for the first time. But what about the Xbox Series X? Oh, it's just an Xbox One, but I guess it's faster now. 600 Canadian dollars faster, I guess. And I guess my $600 wasn't enough to cover the ads either. Now, in fairness, when you boot the PlayStation 5, Sony says, hold my beer. That was like every single PlayStation merged into one super PlayStation, and I loved every second of it. But look what happens when I pop in an extremely expensive 90 Canadian dollar next generation physical game from this incredibly sad and empty plastic box into each console. Yeah, the game needs to install gigabytes of data or download larger and larger patches before you can even get a chance to play. So then you think to yourself, well, okay, I guess while I wait the mildly frustrating 30 minutes for this game to be ready, I can just, play one of the digital games that I already own. But then you find out that when you do that, the network speeds of your consoles are dragged into the frozen depths of HE double hockey sticks. So then you think, Fine, okay, alright. I'll just play another game today and take the hit on the network speed so I can play the new 90 Canadian dollar next generation physical game from this empty plastic box tomorrow. But then the game that you decide to play also has a 60 gig update because of course it does. So at this point you're basically dead inside. But because you're desperate to play anything during the 2 hours of time you have left before you have to go to sleep to your corporate soul-sucking 9-to-5 job, you decide to play the most depressing game of Russian roulette to see which of the games you own doesn't need a 200 gig update until you almost assuredly give up and decide to watch someone else play games on YouTube or Twitch instead. And if that's your case, hello and welcome to the channel, okay? Now, at first glance, it seems like the console experience is objectively worse than those that came before, but if you're skeptical like I was, then don't worry because I decided to bust out my older consoles to put this to the test. So, for the Xbox Series X, I found my original Xbox from over 20 years ago. The idea is simple. On the original Xbox, I'm going to try to play Halo Combat Evolved, a 20-year-old game. Then on the Series X, I'll try to play Halo Infinite to see which console lets me play the game first. Well, that's depressing. But you might not be convinced, so I repeated this same exact test with the PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 2. On the PS2, I'm going to play Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, and on the PlayStation 5, I'll try Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. So this test was really interesting because even with 4K graphics, Insomniac somehow loaded Ratchet on the PS5 in almost half the time. But unfortunately what you don't know is both of these consoles needed their games to be pre-installed ahead of time just so they could compete. Now remember, each of these consoles is playing a game that's pushing their hardware to the limit, but only the previous generations actually let me play the games immediately, and I don't even want to imagine what would happen if these newer consoles weren't connected to the internet. Like, these things have way more power, they have way faster hard drive speeds, and yet I can just play games faster over there. Because you see, in the 9th generation, the games are worse, the play experience is worse, and in the Xbox Series X's case, it barely tries to do anything to trigger any form of nostalgia. I mean, who's launching the Xbox Series X 10 years from now being like,
oh man, the Jurassic World Dominion ad on the front dashboard that I paid 600 Canadian dollars for, and his subscription to Game Pass and Xbox Live, that's when gaming truly peaked. Ah, yeah, the nostalgia.
So, here's the question. If the modern gaming experience boils down to a list of games that are slightly better versions of the previous generation's games that constantly require downloading and or updating, then why not just play games on the PC where the games look and run so much better and I can actually do something else while I wait for my game to download? The truth is, most people wouldn't, which is exactly why we're seeing a dramatic surge in the popularity for PC gaming instead of console gaming that was traditionally always the place to play games first. But there's actually one more reason why people are moving to PC away from the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and it has to do with the way that these consoles treat people. You see, when it comes to video game consoles, there's actually two different eras of communication. The offline era, where you actually had to visit your friends, hang out, bring over a giant CRT TV, and the online era, where you have friends lists, parties, and wonderful messages awaiting you.
Every single person who watches your videos are f***ing stupid.
I'm actually nostalgic for it. But somehow the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 online community feels like an absolute ghost town where there's technically millions of people playing, but no one ever talks. Y'all feeling a good sense of community?
Bravo is off.
Taking these zones, look closer to your fellow man, fellow Spartan.
Your team.
I love it. So, let's go back to 2007 to see just what the heck happened. Okay, it's 2007 and for some reason we talk like this. Broken, weird, Canadian, British accent. But that's just what 2007 was like. So, you want to play Halo 3 with your friends and your 360 hasn't red ringed. What are you to do? Well, first you need a microphone to communicate, and thankfully Microsoft graciously includes a pretty decent quality mic for the time with your Xbox 360. That means that anyone and everyone who has a 360 can communicate online right out the gate. So how do we go about communicating? Well, it is 2007, so communication software is... I'll be blunt, it's terrible. Skype is probably the best out there, but us Canadians, well, we were using MSN Messenger. Fortunately, we're in luck, because sure, the communication software may have been total garbage.
Yeah. Skype in call.
But the software in these consoles were actually magnificent. You see, it had friends lists, a private party system that worked across any game, and like I mentioned before, some of the most wonderful voice messages you could have ever hoped for.
If I ever see you, I'm gonna fucking your face wide open, yeah?
Like I said, 2007 was a different time. But what about the game itself? How did we communicate with the others? You see, by default, Halo and every other multiplayer game let anyone with a microphone communicate openly. Lobbies were active, parties were well indicated on screen with an icon, and proximity chat was always turned on by default.
You don't need communication.
That's how you win.
Push.
You don't need
Just
communication.
push.
Mind-blowing, I know. Every single person you played with could be spoken to just like if we were playing sports in person. It was truly a community. But now let us forward back to the present day to see what the new consoles can do. Okay, so it's 2024 and the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X have a few small differences. Despite being more expensive, the consoles no longer come with microphones.
Next generation gaming!
Sony technically provides one embedded in the controller itself, to be fair, but unless you play like a complete psychopath, it's probably not going to gain mass adoption. Isn't it great that we can just talk right through this controller's mic?
If I ever see you, I'm gonna
You don't do that. That's weird. Next comes the communication software, and it's pretty much the same as before. But while this sounds great on paper, it's actually pretty bad given that it's been over 15 years. You see, companies like Discord have streamlined the way players communicate, and the consoles really haven't tried to keep up. The only innovation I could think of was that the consoles did technically add Discord integration, but in fairness, using Discord on a PC or a phone still feels infinitely better than the watered down version we get on the Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5. Like, I just use my phone. Or you know what I probably do is I just go on the PC instead. But okay, what about the games? How are they handling communication 15 years later? Well, let's use Halo again as an example to showcase the 15 years of innovation. And the reason I use Halo is because, quite frankly, Halo 2 and Halo 3 were revolutionary for really promoting communication within games. Each of these games kind of pushed things forward. Proximity chat,
Done fucking talking, dude.
On the pit game,
Done
dude.
talking,
On the
dude.
pit.
pre and post game lobbies, that all kind of stemmed from the Halos.
He's like, dude, it's like 5 a.m. where you are, go to sleep, and I just replied with Halo 3.
It no longer has pre and post game lobbies and hasn't for over a decade. It no longer has proximity chat. It does, however, support text chat between console and PC crossplay. So that's cool. But they completely block all forms of written or spoken communication with the enemy team entirely. And unfortunately, every game seems to have seen that and decided that rather than figure out a system that works for different communication styles, yeah, it's just easier to block everything completely so no one gets hurt.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
It's as if you played a game of basketball outside, but no one was allowed to talk to each other, and the only way you could talk to your team was to stop, pick up your phone, and then text them before someone hits you in the face with a basketball. And that sounds like a weird analogy, but it's like legitimately true. Sure, I guess technically no one has a chance for harassment in that case.
What did you say, punk?
But it kind of loses a lot of the humanity in the process, don't you think? Look, I love video game consoles, their reveals, their launches, and what they do for the industry.
Some form of connectivity is called Xbox 360.
Right.
So stick with 360, that's your message?
Each one defined a specific part of my life, and I'm pretty sure it did for you guys too. But the honest truth is that the 9th generation consoles are just overpriced, poor gaming experiences where the games are held back by less capable machines, corporate greed, and a censored online environment in a world where if I spend a couple extra $100, I get all of that and more on a PC. The market is basically being forced to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid if these problems continue, video game consoles we know and love will die slowly in a wasteland as nothing but a memory. Except, I don't think they have to. Because the magic of what made video game consoles so special to everyone never truly left. It's always been there, just waiting for someone, anyone, to bring it back.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
To bring back games that aren't afraid to push the industry forward.
I am your shield. I am your sword.
To bring back experiences we'll never forget. And to put players first as a community anyone can play in.
Am I here?
If you haven't left yet, I would advise that you sprint.
Xbox 360!
For the PlayStation
2. And it's on.
It's just one big social gathering, uniting people all over the world for, love of games.
Are you excited? I am now. Like I wasn't before, but like seeing this.
I hope you enjoyed the video. You're beautiful, you're Goose-tastic, and as always, keep it cute.
Hey, can anyone hear me?
Stop talking through the controller. You're an absolute psychopath, and I despise you.